Learn all about living in Mexico City from Elizabeth and David Glidden in this video interview with Expats in Mexico. Why Mexico City?
Great question. So I think the start is to back up a couple years ago, which was I have only ever lived in Washington, D.C. or Yorktown, Virginia, and I don't know Spanish. And I had hit that professional ceiling. And the past couple of years, we've traveled to South America just on vacation and really loved it and I had this crazy idea of, well, what if we lived abroad for a little bit? Because I never went abroad in college. So I did not have that experience. And we talked about it. And then when I really hit that professional ceiling and it was time for me to move on, we thought about it more seriously. But it required David getting the job that he has now. The job that he had previously would not allow him to leave the United States. So if you had asked us last summer if this was going to happen, we would have told you absolutely not. Nothing was really working out. The job opportunities for David weren't looking promising. And then all of a sudden this job came through in the fall. And his job requires him to go back for client meetings back to the US on occasion. And so the cities that we had previously thought about, like Santiago or Buenos Aires, no longer made sense. So we looked at a map and thought, well, Mexico City looks good. We had never been here. And so we hopped on a plane last October, came for 2.5 days just to make sure that we weren't crazy, and really liked it. And then started the process of actually making it happen and moved here at the end of February under a temporary residency visa.
The other sort of consideration is just the cost of living here. Allowing Elizabeth to not work and be just on my salary was going to be easier here in Mexico City than Santiago or Buenos Aires as well, in addition to sort of the flight and travel considerations with my job.
We are super planners, and I think that made the transition here much easier. We could have run into so many more bumps than we have. There have been a couple bumps, but nothing major. Our visas were completed within a week and a half of arriving. David was able to get into this WeWork space right away. I've already started Spanish classes. We had, for the first 3.5 weeks, we were in an Airbnb, but we just moved into a year-long lease last week. We really like our neighborhood. People here have been incredibly friendly and flexible.
It's just a huge cosmopolitan city too. So,
Yeah.
We were very much city people back in DC. We lived in the city proper, used public transportation to get everywhere. We didn't have a car or anything like that. So all of that applies here. And obviously we haven't been around a ton of Mexico City yet. We've really been focused. I mean, we live and work in the financial district, and then we've done some of the touristy things, but we haven't really gone too much outside of our comfort zone yet. So it's been pretty easy and pretty familiar from just a city living perspective.
Yeah, I think when we walk around and we encounter things, the question we always ask ourselves is this a Mexico thing or is this a big city thing?
Yeah.
And 90% of the time, it's a big city thing.
Yeah.
It's not a Mexico thing. Yeah.
What section of the city do you live in?
We live in the delegation of Cuauhtémoc, but also, which people might know of from it's where Roma and Condesa are. But there's also a little neighborhood of Cuauhtémoc just north of Reforma, which is the main financial district. And it's a good mix because during the week it's really busy with all the people who just work in all the office buildings right here. But in the evenings and on the weekends it's very quiet and it's just the families in the neighborhood. And I don't hear English spoken in the neighborhood, which is what I like.
Yeah, the other two neighborhoods that she mentioned, Roma and Condesa, are very a lot more international, have a lot more English spoken. They're definitely more the trendy hipster type neighborhoods as well. And we actually originally wanted to live there. At the end of the day, we felt like our money went a little bit further in this neighborhood, even though it's still in the financial district. It's actually even closer to my office than we would have been. It's still just really really great and feels very sort of native to Mexico City.
Are you renting an apartment?
Yes,
Yeah.
we just signed a year lease. It is, I think, one of the things about, and certainly, we haven't been beyond Mexico City, but I imagine that other places in Mexico are less expensive than Mexico City. And certainly coming from DC, things are less expensive here, but rent prices were higher than we anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were hoping to be able to get a 2-bedroom, which is what we had at home, but we couldn't quite afford that, or it didn't really make sense to afford that. And that, I think, was a surprise to us. Certainly the rent for a 1-bedroom here is significantly less expensive than back in DC, but considering that we're only on one salary, even though it's a US salary, this is still a city and prices are higher than the rest of the country.
What do you pay per month?
Just under $1,200 US a month.
850 square foot?
No, it's 800 square feet.
Foot?
Yeah, don't lie.
No, I think it's
800 square feet. It's 1 bedroom, 1.5 bathrooms, and it was what I call 3/4 furnished. So that's also why it's on the higher side. We just didn't. It was worth spending a little more not to have to worry too much about furnishing, being brand new here.
So you didn't move any furniture down at all?
No, all of our furniture is in storage at home, and we came with 9 suitcases. Ranging from very small carry-on to very large duffels with our clothing and shoes and a couple random items.
You talked about your planning process. Any tips that you could give some of our viewers, the process that you went through to make life a little easier on your move?
We kind of did a pretend budget before we moved here. Mm-hmm. And we update it as we go, but we started with something. We have a master to-do list because moving, you got to do all this paperwork. And all right, once you get your visa, that's just the first step. Then you've got to go open the bank account. And then maybe we want to go get a Mexican driver's license just so we have a Mexican form of ID that isn't our residency card. So yeah, there's like a whole Google folder of information. Oh, figuring out health insurance. Yeah. That was a big one. That took a long time to figure out.
What did you end up with?
We ended up with a Cigna Global plan, which basically, the nice thing about Cigna Global is it lets you pick and choose and kind of pay a la carte. Because we're young and healthy, even though I work in healthcare and would generally tell people otherwise, we just have basically hospital coverage. So if there's an emergency, we have coverage, but based on all the research I did, the cost out of pocket for just basic preventative care is so low here, it didn't make sense to pay for the insurance to cover that. We'll just pay out of pocket when we need to go to the doctor or to the dentist.
Well, since you're brand new in Mexico City, have you had much of a chance to plug into the local community or make friends?
We've done a lot. The nice thing is I've already started Spanish class, so I've made a number, while not Mexicans, I've made a number of friends through class, which has been really nice. Let's see, we've met some of the people in our building, but every weekend, we spend all weekend out and about just seeing as much as we can. In that same Google folder, I have a daily growing list of just things to do and see. And I read the daily, like what to do in Mexico City blogs and magazines. So, whatever seems like fun, we do.
Yeah, there's the city does a really good job of sort of encouraging outdoor activity from the residents here. So it shuts down the major roads in downtown Mexico City on Sundays for biking and hiking or strolling and walking. And for example, there's a aerobics class that's at the Angel of Independence sort of square or circle. So we've been going to those sorts of things and just finding whatever we can do. But yes, definitely still early.
What are the 3 things that you love most about living in Mexico City?
The street food here is amazing. There's taco stands on every corner, and the whole city smells like fried corn. So it's actually a really, really nice thing. So that's number one for me.
I as I assume the rest of Mexico is, there's no air conditioning, or it's rare to have air conditioning in apartments here, which I actually prefer. I'm sure in the middle of summer I might change my mind, but this is very much an outdoor culture so far from what we've seen. Mm-hmm. And we love that. We're not necessarily the people who want to go hiking in the mountains, but we also don't like being inside. And this is definitely a place where on the weekends, families are out and about in the park. Windows are always open, which, sometimes that means you hear the trucks on the sidewalk, but you also just hear the outdoors. So I've really enjoyed that.
And just in general, the weather has been phenomenal.
Yeah, so far.
It's a very temperate climate. It's very high elevation too, which I think contributes to that. So it's been 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, pretty much every week that we've been here, and it's only rained maybe once or twice. Which honestly, I would be okay with it raining a little bit more.
Well, we'll get into rainy season soon.
Yeah,
but
just to clear out some of the dust and the air. But the weather is definitely a plus.
Yeah.
What else do you love?
I love my office space. As I mentioned, I'm in a WeWork, but I'm in the tallest WeWork in the world. So I'm on the 40th floor and have great views of the entire city all around. And then just the atmosphere as well. Like I said, it's a great community. So the facilities are great. So I really love coming to work every day and sort of feeling like I'm on top of the world, which is kind of nice.
And I think because this is such a large city, I mean, Washington, D.C. is a city, but it's a small city. Less than 1 million people actually live in Washington, D.C. A lot more than that come into the city and work every day. But I mean, this is a city of 22 million people, so there's always something to do. You cannot walk more than a couple of blocks without running into something that's going on. And yes, there's noise, but it's a city, right? Like, actually, I don't feel like there's any more noise here than there is in New York City. Yeah. And so for me, I always love being in environments where there's always something else to be seeing and doing. There is no excuse to be bored here ever.
Do you guys go out a lot?
We don't stay out late, but we love food. We love trying new food. So we've been out a couple times already to try some restaurants. I have a growing list of restaurants I want to try. Anytime somebody mentions a place to me, I make sure to write it down. This past weekend when David was away, I went out with one of my classmates. There was a great big first day of spring festival here over the weekend with a lot of live music on Saturday night in the main historic center. And that was a ton of fun.
Just like the markets and stuff when we go shopping, or just whether it's sort of secondhand markets or actual food markets, we love going to those. That's been most of what we've done, and some touristy stuff. We've gone to a couple museums and sort of the usual things, trying to knock some of those off early in our stay here.
You had mentioned earlier that you were surprised a little bit that the cost of living wasn't quite as low as you had anticipated. Which of the cost of living areas did you think were a little higher than you thought?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I can kind of talk to both. Transportation is less expensive than we even anticipated, which has been nice. Rent has been a little higher than anticipated, but I also, in talking to some of my classmates, some of them are getting like amazing rent deals, and I think it just depends on the neighborhood, if you want it furnished or unfurnished. What day of the week you happen to talk to the landlord. There's just lots of different variables. Food is a tricky one. So food in some ways is less expensive, but also more expensive. And I'll explain why. I can go get lunch at a market for under $2 US dollars, which is incredible and incredibly cheap. But when you're doing that every day, it adds up. And so our food budget every month is going to have to be higher than what we anticipated. Partly because when you're new to a city and you just want to be out and about all the time, we're just eating out more than we would be at home. Mm-hmm. But we sort of in general say that from Washington, D.C. to Mexico City, it's about 60% of the cost in general.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about moving to Mexico?
Do it. Absolutely do it. Yeah, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I would. I mean, for us, I think making sure that it makes sense for you, right? For your financial situation, for your life situation. For us, like this is the best time to go. We have very few obligations. And, I think we're actually very conservative from a, risk perspective. And so this is the right time for us. And so just figuring out the best time, and the sort of thinking through again, like what you'll actually have to do when you get there, what you're going to actually have to pay for. It's not the sort of the details aren't always sexy in terms of the what you're going to be doing every day, because a lot of it is just normal living, but you've got to account for that. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, Mexico City it's very this place is very cosmopolitan. We felt very safe here, which is often something online.
We get asked a lot.
Yeah, we get asked by all of our family, is it safe? And we feel just as safe, if not more safe than back home. So I would say just advice is do your homework, do some of the planning, and think about why it is that you want to go. Right?
Yeah, I think
why it makes sense.
I think the biggest thing is for us, it's important that we're not coming here to continue living our American lives. Mm-hmm. That's not the point. And I think for anyone who's thinking about moving abroad, no matter where you want to move to, you have to make sure that you're willing to take on the culture and the life of where you're moving, or else, to be honest, it might be a waste of your money. Because there are a lot of costs in moving abroad, even if you're selling all your stuff at home. Yep. And part of the fun and part of the experience is taking on what your new culture is different, is doing differently, and really embracing everything and not trying to stick to your old ways.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.